thank you for joining us for today's public talk, which is the first in a series of talks from our artists who are exhibiting in the Fine Arts Gallery here at Mott Community College. Just to let you know, our next exhibition, so we can promote the next event with you guys, is that will be in the gallery, will feature the works of 9 sculptors working in southeastern Michigan. This exhibition is being curated by our very own Dr. Jenna Andrews. So that will be happening here in a few weeks. But today, we are here to talk about the current exhibition, which is very exciting. I got a chance to walk through, and I will admit very hurriedly today as I was rushing from meeting to that because they finished setting it up last week, but it is a pretty amazing exhibition if you haven't got to see it yet. But today we are here for the Anthony and Davida Artis Collection of African American Fine Art. The title of the show is Faith, Family, and Faces, which is very apparent if you look at the work, some of those themes coming through. So it is an amazing collection, and this is just a sampling of it, correct? So it is my pleasure today to introduce Mr. Anthony Artis, and he's going to talk to us about what they do with this collection, the outreach, I think, that you are involved in this community, and so we're very excited. So help me in giving him a warm round of applause.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Hopefully you all can hear me clearly through the raspy voice. My son, he had strep throat about a week ago, and I came down with similar symptoms 2 days later, and I've been wrestling with it for about a week, but I'm just grateful to be here. I'm also a pastor, and so I'm used to speaking, raspy or not, but for the most part, we're so delighted to be able to share our collection. My wife, she's the better half of the Anthony and Davida Artis Collection of African American Fine Art. If you don't mind. There would be no such collection if she didn't encourage it and support it, and I'm just very grateful to her, am endeared to her. We will celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary come December, and so we're hometown people, and we're just again grateful. I also want to say thank you. Well, first I thank the Lord for blessing us to be here. I give honor to Him everywhere I go. Just like a golfer, and he always has his clubs with him. So everywhere I go, I have the Lord with me, and just honored to be here. And acknowledging the president, Dr. Beverly Walker Graffia. I think she's in travel status right now, but for the most part, we want to thank her, thank the Board of Trustees, thank the department heads here in the art department, to Jim, Tim, Brian, again, to everyone who's here today. I have my family, brother, and my parents who are here, and again, we thank God for each and every one of you. So without further ado and delay, it is my honor and proud privilege to present to you the Anthony and Davida Artis Collection of African American Fine Art. Many people ask oftentimes, why do you collect? Why is this even important? We collect for several reasons. One, we want to inspire others in learning more about the particular artists and learning more about the artworks. I can't help but find inspiration all the time through their stories, through their lives. You know, some of them were starving artists. You had an artist by the name of Augusta Savage. Augusta Savage had created many works, but she was in poverty. And out of her frustration, she ended up destroying over 1,000 of her works because she couldn't survive, and she felt like it was offensive to see all the time and effort that she put into something, and she was really struggling. So if you can find an Augusta Savage piece, now it's even more special because I realized some of the day-to-day struggles and trials that she had to endure. So it gave me a great appreciation, not just for the work, but for those who invested their time and effort in the things that we look at, and just very grateful for. Secondly, we want to teach Black history or African American history, which is indelibly linked to American history, it's hard to separate one from the other. And so for the most part in collecting, we find ourselves learning so much about our own people, about our own American history, Black American history, and African American history. And so each time we pick up a piece or discover a new artist, we learn something that never, quite honestly, was ever taught to me in class. I felt as a 40-year-old man, I'm learning Black history that I just never knew existed. And so for me, it's nice to be able to share those items. You know, you'll see one piece in our collection. It has a picture of a gentleman who's the first Heisman Trophy winner, first African-American Heisman Trophy winner. Yet most of us, we know Mark Ingram, we know Cam Newton, we know Billy Sims, we know the great Barry Sanders, but we don't know Ernie Davis. They made a movie called the Elmira Express, and oftentimes he would take his team down the field, and right before they get too deep into the red zone, the coach will pull him out because he didn't want the black man to have to score, because the crowd would go berserk, and oftentimes he would get yanked right before crossing the goal line. Well, this man, despite those efforts, he led his team to a national championship in the Cotton Bowl. He, being a star, a running back for Syracuse University, following in the footsteps of his friend Jim Brown and his mentor, he led them to a national championship. He went on to become the number one NFL draft pick. It's good to see somebody with the Lions representing in the house. But long story short, he died at the tender age of 23. He had leukemia, blood cancer, and never actually, took one snap in the NFL. And somebody made a comment to him and said, "Sir, isn't it sad that you have, preparing to die at such a young age?" And he says, "Well, I'm not quite 23. He died at 23. He said, I have lived an amazing life." And he was a great man, and I don't think enough people know his story. So that's just one of many pieces, one of many stories that we find ourselves learning. Thirdly, to build wealth. It's no accident that a lot of collectors have wealth. Again, that's something we aspire towards, but a lot of wealthy people, they spend their money in art, and it has a significant intrinsic value, and whether you're doing it for the monetary reason or because of your creative genius. Either way is great, but there is a wealth component and financial aspect to it, which we kind of learned. A lot of this is just really falling in my lap. My last name is Artis, and people think, we create art. And, Davida, she's a much better artist than I am. But long story short, I said, no. I said, it's just my last name. I can't draw a lick. If you ever saw my handwriting, you realize, people say, are you writing in tongues or something? Because I can't even understand what you're writing, and that's okay. We're just a middleman, but at the same time, I think God has a sense of humor, because now, doing a lot of work with artists literally around the country, we're just so honored and delighted. Also to encourage entrepreneurship. We live in Flint, may die in Flint, and when people see us and what we're doing, I hope that they would be able to lift their head up high and say, wow, this came out of Flint. It hurts my heart when I do business with people in Detroit and they see me as an African-American man, and they say, well, listen, where are you getting this arts from? And I tell them I'm from Flint, and sometimes that adds to further scrutiny because, they've never met a black guy from Flint. Hopefully at this tender age, it's starting to gray, and what isn't gray is shaved off, but I'm starting to show my age now. But long story short, we're always overcoming barriers. And I realized that a lot of the artists, guess what? They overcame barriers. How would you feel if you had a work and it was shown in a museum, but yet because of the color of your skin, you couldn't even access it? Or if they realized that an African American drew the picture, then all of a sudden it came down off the walls. And this isn't so far from our modern day, because in South Africa they just built an extremely beautiful museum. But in 1994, if you were a minority, you couldn't enter. So history has a way of tending to repeat itself. I'm not trying to sound morbid, but for me, I just can't share it enough, and so grateful. Lastly, to leave a legacy. Long after I'm gone, hopefully the collection will keep on thriving as well as surviving. The first piece we owned with any real investment aspect was by my favorite African-American artist, Henry Ossawa Tanner. This particular piece was created around circa 1905, circa 1904. Wonderful, wonderful artist. His father was Bishop Benjamin Tanner. He was a bishop in the AME Church, African Methodist Episcopal Church. His aspiration was that his son would grow up and follow his father's footsteps and be a preacher like his dad, maybe even a bishop. And during vacation Bible school or Sunday school, the son oftentimes was painting. And his father was like, son, when are you gonna, kind of get in front of the pulpit? And he says, well, Dad, he says, you preach from your pulpit. He said, but I preach using my brush. And he stayed faithful to his calling as an artist. He received international acclaim. He had to leave the country, got acknowledged over in France, began to win awards as he began to feature more religious themes. This particular piece is called "The Disciples See Christ Walking on the Water." And on is not a misnomer. And I said, wow, every time I look at this piece, I think about, Jesus standing on the water. And it just blows my mind. And see Peter there getting ready to exit the boat in faith. And so for me, every time I saw that piece, I just realized that not only do miracles happen then, but miracles happen now, because I never fathomed that we would ever own a real artwork like this. And so we bought this piece in January of 2009. At the time, I lost my job, and we had to sell it out of duress in 2010, for which we were able to almost break even. But it broke my heart because, again, you never forget your first, and it was true in this case. We were honored to be able to purchase a similar piece, which is in our collection in the gallery. It took us many, many years from 2010 to just being able to own it again, but we're so honored to have it. I'll never sell this particular piece unless Davida says sell it. So, who do we collect? We collect the following artists have been in our collection. Some we've purchased and sold, some we still have. Some of the names include famous artists. I love the legendary masters such as Benny Andrews, Edward Mitchell Bannister, Romare Bearden, Mary Lee Bendoff, one of the artists from the G's Ben Collaborative, Dr. Margaret Burroughs, who's the co-founder of the DuSable Museum in Chicago, Illinois. The list goes on and on. Jacob Lawrence. When I worked at the Ruth Ma Foundation many years ago, had the privilege of meeting Richard Hunt. I didn't even know who he was. He came in my office, and I was introduced to him, and he says, "Hi, I'm Richard." And I said, "How are you, sir?" I said, "Well, I'm Anthony Artis." He said, "Anthony, I'm so honored to meet you. So honored to meet you today. You've made my day." And then he politely exited the office, and many years later, I come to realize, wow, that was the same guy. He was so humble, and I was blown away by his personality and his just kind persona. Also featured, you'll see listed, is Mr. Eddie Watkins, another favorite artist. He's gracing us with his presence today. Eddie's just a phenomenal artist, a wonderful, wonderful man of God, wonderful friend, and I'm just very blown away at the skills that he and his wife, Marsha Watkins, possess. I believe she has taught at the University of Michigan Flint, and he's taught here. And so, again, we're just so delighted. And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Mr. Brian Liljeblad. He has been a wonderful partner. I'm going to clap myself because, Brian, it's a pleasure to work with. And this is a dream come true for me. I oftentimes see things before I see them. And I saw myself doing this at the University of Michigan Flint, my alma mater, in the Kiva. And it didn't happen, but it's here at the RTC building, auditorium, at my community college's campus. We entrusted our precious babies to this college. Our oldest son is Blake, artist who graduated a few years ago with honors, no less. Very proud of him. And my youngest son, who he should be in class right now, or is he out of class right now? Okay, he's my other precious baby, and so just trying to encourage him to finish, and he started strong, and I believe he'll finish strong. And so we felt that if we can trust our actual precious babies with you, then we had no problem entrusting our other precious babies, the artworks, here on campus. And so again, it's an honor. After meeting NBA, ex-NBA basketball player, Mr. Elliot Perry. He had an exhibit at FIA a few years ago. And in meeting him, he said, Anthony, if you're a collector, he said, what you need to do is kind of scale down. You're going to have to kind of lock in and find a niche. You can't collect everything, you can't buy everything, you can't afford it. He said, but you want the collection to speak regarding the things that are important to you and your wife and your family. And so our focus are three themes, or three things. One is faith. This particular piece is called The Seat of Power. It was created by none other than my friend, Mr. Eddie Watkins. And here it's a picture of me actually doing this. He had took a picture of me. I came in town and preached a sermon about Esther. And I remember him taking the picture and never thought it would be in any kind of artwork. He remembered the piece and he included it. The person standing in the chair is a picture of me. And in the foreground, you can see a picture of Jesus on the cross. And you see this humongous chair, which represents the fact that oftentimes preachers, pastors, clergy, we stand at a huge seat, a powerful seat. Our office has huge responsibilities. It shows a guy on the bottom, he has a wearied face. And it oftentimes shows that, you know what? To preach a funeral, not long ago I had to preach a funeral for an aunt. And I had to, as much as I was grieving, I had to kind of save face and hold back in order to be there for the family. And that's a very hard thing to do. Shows off in the corner a mask. Sometimes, you see people in church and they're like, how are you? Blessed and highly favored. And then they take off the mask. Sometimes people don't really show or share their burdens. Not trying to be offensive to anybody, but then also it shows a monkey on our back. In the background, there's a monkey, like a monkey on a person's back, and it just shows that you just don't know the things that people go through. And so anyway, faith is one component. The other component we focus on is family. Family. Here's a picture. I fell in love with it. The picture is called Two Sisters. And every time I look at it, I can't help but see the picture to the far right is a picture of my mother who's being curdled by her sister, her twin sister. Juanita is my mother's name, and her twin is Melita. And you can see, the one sister being protective of the other. Well, when I looked at the actual piece by Michael Platt, I knew the little picture of little girls with two dresses and the bows. I didn't even notice the bows until after I had the picture side by side. So every time I look at this picture, it takes me back to a place in time before I was born, thinking about what life was like for my mother in Mississippi way back in the day. The name of the piece is called Two Sisters, and Mr. Michael Platt, when we shared this at the Flint Public Library a couple years ago, and it's amazing all the connections that take place in the art world. He made a comment. He said, Anthony, we're happy to share any educational purposes, feel free. He said, where are you showing it at? I said, we're showing it, initially at the Flint Public Library. He said, Flint? He said, my wife, Carol Bean, she's a poet. He said, man, she was raised in Flint. He said, we'd be honored to have you share our image. And so he has consented again. Earlier this year, he mentioned, he said, if you're ever on the East Coast, come check us out. He's a retired professor from Howard University. We went out there in April on short notice to go to a collector's workshop. He and his wife found out, and we let them know, hey, we're in town. They said, listen, come check us out. We went to meet them, see some of his artworks, go to his studio for the first time. And she had set out this beautiful spread, all the shrimp and fresh melons, and it was just so wonderful, but just kind-hearted people. And the third focus is faces. This is a face of a young man drawn by Kehinde Wiley. Never thought in 1,000 years we would own any artworks by this phenomenal emerging artist. And it shows a young man. Oftentimes, for years I would go to a museum and I would be utterly offended because none of the artworks looked like me. I almost felt uninvited. I felt like, why are we not, are we not good enough to, be framed and shown somewhere? That's how I felt. And many years, FIA and a lot of other institutions have went out of their way to be more welcoming, and I'm just so grateful. So to see his artwork in the collection, again, we're so glad we just made this purchase through the gentleman that created Baby Fat, Russell Simmons. He has a set of artworks that they sell to try to get the average person to purchase art, and they're doing great things in New York. And then also another question many people ask is, hey, where do you buy this stuff? You know, we can't just go to a store in Flint and pick it up. Most of the art that we purchase is purchased from around the country. Oh, you need the camera? Doesn't matter, doesn't matter. Oh, okay, I can. Hey, I do like walking around. This is liberating. So anyway, many people ask, where do you buy? And you can buy literally from around the country. These are some of the places we've done business with. We haven't done business with Christie's, but we've done business with the others. Doom & Shells is located in Detroit, right across from the Renaissance Center, the gym building now on Jefferson. Freeman's Auctions is from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We've purchased artworks from Schwann Auction Galleries in New York City. They were the first gallery in the country to actually have an auction specifically comprised of African-American artworks. They were the first to do it. Many people felt like, oh man, you're losing money. You know, they're not, you know, you can't compare that to a Picasso or a Rembrandt or a Dali or a Matisse or all these other kind of artists. And, but yet there's a niche, and actually it's a very hot niche. Also, we sold pieces with Leslie Hyman auctioneers in Chicago. And, but here's my favorite place. Oh yeah, eBay. You can say what you want to, you know, you have to have a very scrutinizing eye, but I'm amazed at some of the things that people sell out of duress. You know, you have an international marketplace, and again, I can't go into a store, so when we buy something, we have to order it out of state typically, and then when you get it in, you don't even know if you've lost your money or if it's even legitimate until it comes in the mail. But once it comes in the mail, you know, you either realize, oh man, I got scammed, or you know what, man, this is the real deal. And so we love it when it's the real deal. Yeah, and these are some of the opportunities that have availed because of our interest in art. And again, my last name is Artis, but I can't draw, but maybe this is something that God intended from day one for us to be involved with this. The upper left-hand corner, there's a picture of Dr. David C. Driscoll. Dr. Driscoll is, by all means, I am so impressed with him. He's a scholar, author, printmaker. He's been doing this for over 50 plus years. Has an amazing collection. I mean, his home collection is like walking into a museum with 200-year-old stuff in there. I mean, just amazing. Brilliant man. Had a chance to meet him in April of this year. Sama Qatar, a young artist. I don't know if she's Iranian or Iraq descent, but Sam, I don't know if she's here today. She's just a wonderful artist. She attends Kettering University. Just started drawing abstracts about a year ago. She reminds me of the great work by Jackson Pollock for those who follow abstracts. I mean, she's just an amazing artist. I met her trying to help her business to grow. Professor Curly Holton, wonderful printmaker, esteemed on Lafayette University's campus, and just a wonderful guy. My friend Michael Platt, and again beside him, he's the one that did Two Sisters. He has this long beard, and his wife, an amazing poet, Carol Bean, her brother who lives with them, Glenn, and my lovely wife, Davita. Don't have enough words to talk about my wife, so if you decide to cut the mic, I mean, I can talk about her because I love her, and I'm so grateful for her.
All right.
And if I was in church, I'd say, let the church say,
Amen.
Amen.
Right.
Ernie Dumichel, his family owns Dumichels, again in Detroit, wonderful friend. Then Dr. Stella Jones. Dr. Stella Jones, she is a legendary gallery owner out of New Orleans, Louisiana. A phenomenal lady. When we went to this collector's workshop, every time a presenter gave a presentation, they would look around the room and they saw Stella and they would just pay great homage to Stella. Well, on that particular day, I was seated right beside Stella. And, you know, when I introduced myself, you know, hi, I'm Anthony. She said, hi, I'm Stella. And I said, okay. But everyone that came in, including Dr. Driscoll, when they saw her, you know, Dr. Jones is with us, and everyone started clapping. I'm sitting there like, you know, she was just like, you know, I'm Stella. I don't know what he's talking about. But it was her. And she was so humble, wonderful, wonderful lady. And it just has a heart of gold. And then Cedric Huckabee, many of you may not be familiar with him. Wonderful artist. We had a chance to go to his house. His wife was expecting Lakeisha. Davita and I, we went to Texas. And while we were there, touch base with him, I asked him to do an artwork about my grandmother. He had a project called Big Mama's Project, and anyone who has a grandmother, you may or you may have either a big mama or a little mama, but she's a mama in some facet or another. He did a wonderful project that went around the country about his dying grandmother, and he drew pictures of her when she was alive, and then after she passed, he drew a lot of pictures of the images around the house that brought back fond memories from him. And but long story short, while we were there, his wife said, did you tell Anthony and Davita what you're working on? He's real humble. She says, tell him. He says, I was just hired to teach a guy how to paint. And she says, tell him. And he says, well, the guy is former President George W. Bush. He's my student, and I'm teaching him how to paint paint pictures of wounded warriors. And so he did this collaborative, painting all these wounded warriors, put it in a book, gave all the proceeds to that particular project. And Cedric, again, you had to almost twist his arm to have him tell about it. Just a humble guy, just a phenomenal artist. And again, Eddie Watkins, his work speaks for itself, has a heart of gold, and very impressed. We hope to add more pieces, so the more opportunities we get a chance to share this locally and hopefully regionally and nationally, we get a chance to highlight some of the great work that's being done in Flint. And then also we met Winfred Rimbert. He has a wonderful story when he came to FIA. How are we on time? You good? Okay, does it make sense to buy African American art? My answer is definitely yes. These particular pieces, Richard Mayhew's A Landscape for Bob, giving honor to Robert Blackburn. The centerpiece is Children with Flowers by Elizabeth Catlett, my favorite female African-American artist. And then the piece on the far right is New York Cafe by Benny Andrews. I saw this online for $19.95 plus $8 shipping and handling. Grand total, can you all see that okay in the back? $27.95. The person mentioned on eBay, he said he just cleared out his grandfather's closet and he put this up. He saw the last name, he thought it was something Warden, and he put a bunch of question marks. As soon as I saw it, I knew this was none other than Romare Bearden. And I'm here to tell you, it pays, and it pays well to know your black history. And as soon as I saw it, I know that Romare Bearden oftentimes writes his first name and his last name together like one word. And so I bought it. I told Davita, I bought this one without asking for permission first. So I just bought it. I said, baby, I spent $27.95. And because she'd be like, Anthony, you better pay some of these bills. And I said, you know what, we got to buy some of this art. So it was a struggle that we used to have. But our goal is to get out of debt. And we want to owe no man nothing but to love him. Anyway, I saw this piece, tried not to get excited about it until it came in the mail. And once it did arrive, we saw that everything was legitimate. We sold that piece for $3,000 in Chicago, Illinois, a few years ago. This piece resold a year ago for $8,000. Now somebody has it listed for $9,500.
Wow. We
We made 10,633%. That was our return on investment with this one particular purchase. So I'm blown away. I hear people get excited about making 2% or getting a CD paying 5%. I just laugh to myself because our And everywhere we go, when we can sell, we try to touch base with the catalog and let them know. We want to let the world know we're from Flint, Michigan. And so when they show us, and in this case they listed our name and that we're from Flint, and we want to try to turn the city's image into a better one. Here's a piece. This piece was actually shown at FIA. And you can learn something from anybody. I used to have an uncle, he would get drunk. And when he would get drunk, he would say, Anthony, you think you're smart? And I would have, my back pocket, I'd walk around with my report card, had all A's. I was in 7th grade, he thought I knew everything. And he said, Anthony, give me 21 coins that make $1 quick. 3 answers. And I couldn't answer it. I knew algebra, geometry, and I couldn't answer his question. Oh, he used to bother me. And he would often say, you can learn anything from anybody. Just remember that. I went to FIA, and there was a gentleman who was being ignored in the corner. He was a security guard. And so I just started talking with the security guard, just being friendly. And his name was Jim. Jim was an elderly white gentleman, and he told me, he said, Anthony, he didn't care nothing about me being black. I didn't care anything about him being white. We were there to appreciate art. And he said, Anthony, he said, you see this piece? He said, this is by Alexander Calder. He said, you see this particular piece, it's by so-and-so. You see this piece? And then he said, Anthony, he said, I want you to go to the lobby. This piece is on sale. They have 100 of them. Just buy it. And I said, well, you know, what makes it interesting? He says, African-American artist, Mary Lee Bendoff. At the time, I never heard of her, never heard of G's Ben. And he said, just buy it, just buy it. So not only did I buy it, I encouraged my mother and father-in-law to buy it. I encouraged a couple other people to buy it. We went to FI and they said, wow, they said, there's a lot of interest in this piece all of a sudden. You know, I'm trying to tell people. Some people blew me off and I'm like, oh, that's okay. I wish I would have bought 10 of them. This piece now is worth $1,800.
Wow.
Yep. So that's at least a 600% investment, or 600% return on investment at least. Long story short, it sold for as high as $4,000 in New York. And so again, it pays to know your black history. You all are so quiet.
Right.
This piece, and I don't know if you know this person by face, I saw it on sale online and got my wife's consent. You know, we try to work together. And I said, baby, I said, this piece is worth at least a couple $1,000s. And it was sold for $475, and we try to make our money on the front end. You have to know what it's worth that you can sell it for. And our old-fashioned adage is buy low, sell high. Buy low, sell high, simple as that. So I knew if we can buy it at $400-something that it would be worth at least a couple grand. So God puts it on my heart to go to Doom Shells for the first time in 2016. Now we're in full-time ministry. Our church has blew up to a number of 8 people. My wife and family, 4 of us and 4 more people. And people look at us and think that, you know, all is well, but really art was putting food on the table for my family. And for me, it's very serious. For me, it supplemented our income. And so I wish I could take a group of 100 people. And of course, you will be charged, but I would love to charge them about $100 and teach them how to make thousands of dollars with just a few hundred. And something that I would love to do, and if you're interested, they'll show our number. And but anyway, that's a long-term pipe dream. Saw this piece, and Davida found this picture online, which shows, anyone here know this individual? Jackie Robinson, number 42, Brooklyn Dodgers. Well, this is showing him, he was suffering from diabetes. You can see in his temple, you can see the vein swell. You can see the vein swell in the artwork. The artist is Charles White, a wonderful, phenomenal artist. Saw the piece, and if you are a fan of Ken Burns, I had the privilege of meeting Ken Burns in Mount Pleasant. He's a filmmaker. He did a wonderful story about Jackie Robinson, and right at the end of the movie, the documentary, they showed this picture. Again, let me go back, yep. So I take it to Doom Shells. They don't know me from Adam. All they know is I'm from Flint, I'm a black guy, they don't know me, I don't know them. And all of a sudden they begin to scrutinize, saying, well, how are you getting this? And what about provenance? And how is it authentic? And going through all these extra layers of questions and answers. And when I took it to Doom Shells, initially they said, you know, we thought you had paintings. We thought you had some expensive artworks. And they said, well, you know, these are just works on paper. So they were kind of poo-pooing my our investments per se. And it was offensive in more ways than one. I asked for a catalog. God gave it to me. Took my catalog, took it to someone else. Never gave me my catalog back. I said, sir, that was mine. You gave it away. He says, well, she's a buyer. And I said, wow. And so all of a sudden, you know, I'm realizing some of the issues that many, sadly, you know, we live in America and sometimes these things happen. And so I get offended. I go home, I poke my lip out. My wife said, Anthony, how did it go in Detroit? It didn't go too good. The guy who we turned it in to, I told him, I said, sir, this piece is worth at least a couple $1,000s. He said, no. He said, it's worth, he said, we'll mark it at $800, high $1,300. You'll be lucky if it sells. I says, okay. So, but I'm a man of faith. I'm a man of prayer. And I'm praying. I'm like, Lord, you know, just, you know, work it out. Long story short, the day of the auction was right before we had church service. I'll never forget it. It was Sunday. We cut it online. All of a sudden, I said, baby, here comes Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson gets up the back. And the bidding begins, 800, goes to 1,000, 1,200. And I'm excited. I'm jumping for joy. Literally. I think I was hoarse that day. I was hoarse by the time they finished. Long story short, my computer goes blank. My online, I don't know what it was, my screen goes dark, and all of a sudden, when it cuts back on, it says 3,000, 3,500, 4,000, 4,500, and ultimately bidding closed.
Wow.
$5,500. Glory be to God.
Yes.
And I jumped, I shouted, oh, boy, you should have seen. Now you be jumping and shouting too, some of y'all looking at me like, what is this problem? Oh man, you let $475 blow up into over $5,000 and you got bills coming. You be shouting for joy. But anyway, I get excited, you can tell. I used to be a accounting major, so. But long story short, now this is another wonderful story. Now I'll expedite the presentation and get ready to wrap this up, but saw this piece online, the far right piece. A lady had it, and I saw it, and it's Henry Ossawa Tanner. Again, it pays to know your black history. My favorite artist, I see the piece, buy it immediately. I used to work in sales. I used to be a stockbroker also. I worked a lot of jobs, you know, last one hired, first one fired. It's been a story of my life. Now in full-time ministry, I have the best boss in the world, and the benefits are awesome.
Thank you, Lord.
Yes, sir. And then see this piece, and I asked her, I said, ma'am, I said, you have any other pieces you want to sell? She says, yes. And I said, ma'am, these pictures have some value. And she says, well, my husband collected African-American art, and I'm selling all of his pieces, pennies on the dollar. And she says, Anthony, I tell you what, she says, how much did I sell the other piece to you and your family for? I said, $175. She said, well, I got another piece that looks just like it. How about I sell it to you at the same price? Boy, oh boy. We have books by Tanner, and I saw 2 actual oil paintings based on the studies that were hand-drawn. The picture on the far right is called The Return of the Grieving Women, showing the emotions that took place when Christ was crucified. And then the other picture is called The Three Marys, and it shows the women who went to the tomb, and there was a resurrected Lord. And so there's grief on one side and overwhelming joy and excitement on the other side. We sold these pieces to $350, and it became $17,500. And again, it pays to know. Yes. Okay, I'll wrap it up. This piece we were blessed to sell to a New Jersey collector. Got it for $900. DeVita negotiated that purchase, and we were fortunate to sell it for this price. And so if you had a few $1,000s extra, maybe that can pay your consumer's power bill for the year. Maybe it can get you 6 months ahead on your mortgage. Maybe it can help you finance your child going to daycare, or purchase a used vehicle to help you get to school. But I'm not a rocket scientist, and you can learn this as well. So. And I'm going to hurry, get ready to close. I saw this article in January 2013. This is Ariel Nessel, wonderful man, a very wealthy gentleman. At the time, he was 39 years old, and he desired to give away $1,000 a day. So in a year, he's going to give away $365,000. I saw this article, and I said, hey, one of those $1,000 has my name on it. And a year and a half later, we were awarded funds from the Pollination Project out of Beverly, California. This $1,000 grant put us on the map nationally. We were featured in the Huffington Post and a blog. Here's a picture of the former mayor, Walling, and I was just telling him about some of the things we were doing. And this allowed us to show it in public for the first time. Yeah. And here's just some articles featuring my wife and I locally. Again, in 2015, I think that's when the collection was shown at the Flint Public Library. And then we received a business grant, one of 30 companies funded in 2016. I have a picture that's in the gallery of Harriet Tubman. And second graders love Harriet Tubman. Oh man, we went to Grand Blanc Academy, and a lot of people were saying the art is too above the kids' heads, they're not gonna grasp it. We went in there and they asked the artist, they said, can you draw SpongeBob? And the guy drew SpongeBob. But then we also mentioned Harriet Tubman, and the kids went berserk. And so we figured that we would bring this piece to class and show the kids how to try to draw Harriet Tubman. So it was just huge. They just read a book called All About Minty or something like that about Harriet Tubman as a child. We have two programs that we try to do. One is our community outreach for symposiums such as this, where we share our collections in the form of a short exhibit, give a public speech. We use it, if you look around the room, you know, we have people from all races, all nationalities, different genders, different ages. Art has that power, no different than sports. People can fall out over all kinds of things, but sometimes sports, but arts and culture can also bring people together, and that's what we desire to do. You know, we want to see it improve race relations. We want to see people, you know, proud of the city they live, and we want people to just feel good after hopefully seeing the artworks. This is, again, a picture from a couple years ago. Had a huge turnout. And then art education outreach. One time we did a presentation at Kettering, and they came up to us, a lot of parents, and they said, listen, they said, do you have anything for our children? It would be great for our kids to learn this kind of stuff. And after spending some time thinking about it, musing over it, David and I, we created a program that caters to K through 12 students. We taught first at Grand Blanc Academy, initially with their second graders. The day we shared it with the second graders, the principal said, can you teach this immediately to our 5th graders, 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders? Wow. We said we would be honored. And during the summer, we got a couple grants where we were funded to share it as a summer arts camp. And my community college was our partner. We did this at the campus in Fenton for the summer. Had a huge success. And again, you know, we're trying to use it to build literacy, because right now, you know, they're building prisons based on the 3rd grade behavior of our young boys. And so we want to see some empty places go up, and we want to see some young people knowing not just, you know, the 3 R's, but we also want them to learn about art too, and have some self-esteem as they build their vocabulary and hopefully are inspired. Yeah, this was the first class we did the pilot with, Mrs. Brianna Brown and Grand Blanc Academy as the beat in the corner, and Brad Dean, our program artist. Yeah. These are the 2nd graders. Again, they love Harry Tubman, boy. You know, art is powerful. And it's funny because sometimes the kids, they will draw something, and the first thing they'll do, they'll say, oh, this is ugly, or oh, this is terrible, or oh, this is bad. And there's an artwork, I don't know if my uncle is here, he had drew a piece entitled The Dancer, and for years it was in my grandmother's home. And I believe he drew it. He asked my aunt to pose, and she just kind of did like that real quick, and he captured the image, drew the picture, he saw a flaw, balled it up, threw it away. My grandmother gracefully picked it up, ironed it out, put it in a frame. And my uncle now, he's up around 80. Is he 80 years old?
No, he's, I just turned to, he'll be 79 tomorrow.
79?
Day after my birthday.
He'll be Saturday 9 tomorrow. And my father is 76.
Today.
Today is my dad's birthday. Happy birthday, Dad.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
So anyway, it's a beautiful piece, and so even though you may not like it, it really speaks to people, and we're just touched to see so many people pause. I think Josh, he's here, and Jacob, they were looking at it recently, and so it just did my heart good to be able to, you know, take word back to Uncle Ronnie. And so this is Davida here at Freeman, and we're just so blessed to see kids touched by art. I mean, look at that smile. You know, and someone may look at it and say, oh, you know, that doesn't look like much. Well, you just don't know. If you've never been introduced to watercolor or oil pastels or whatever, and to see kids beaming, I mean, it just makes our day. You know, this is Ben Daw's piece, and they were mimicking the piece, and again. And the kids, they don't care if the artists are African-American. They just like the art, and so for us, you know, it's just awesome. You know, here's another piece. And here's some of the partners. You can't do it by yourself. Me and Davida, we can't do it alone. We need partners. We've got many partners: Tom Gores, Flint Now Foundation, Huntington Bank, Flint and Genesee Chamber, Pollination Project, We Grow Arts, GFAC, my community college. We're again so honored to have you. Big Brothers Big Sisters, Metro. Then this is the last slide, Kettering, or next to last slide. Community Foundation of Greater Flint, Dedicated Believers Ministries, that's the church that we pastor and have co-founded, and the Puffin Foundation. It's interesting, the Puffin Foundation, they specifically said they do not fund religious organizations. I wrote them a grant. The president called me and she says, Anthony, we don't fund. She said, did you, do your research? And I said, yes, ma'am. I says, but your mission is to support the arts, am I correct? And she says, yes. She says, as a matter of fact, the program you wrote was awesome. She said, the proposal was very strong. She says, but we don't fund religious organizations. So in my rebuttal, I said, ma'am, I said, if you're supporting the arts and we're asking for art support, I said, we're not using this to proselytize or anything. I said, we're teaching children arts. And, I said, I think the shoe fits. Month goes by, she's getting ready to take a flight to Tibet. And she says, Anthony, I just wanted to let you know, I just sent you a check for $600 because you're exactly right. And she says, we're experiencing lead problems in Ohio, and maybe you can connect with the people in Ohio. And it's an honor to have you as one of the Puffins in the Puffin Foundation West family. And so it's just good to be able to change people's hearts by simply doing the right thing. Yep. And this is our contact information. So thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Any questions?
Any questions?
Well, I was going to ask you, I understand that the themes of your collection are family faith, family, and faces. But do you ever collect anything that would be in the abstract realm?
Yeah. That's sort of, if we had a fourth category, that would probably be it, because we find ourselves, we love the abstracts, and so we have about maybe 4 or 5 pieces that are abstracts. And also, I didn't denote it, but a lot of the artists in our collection, they may not be all African American. There's a picture of a little girl called Miss America. When you see the gallery, it's a little girl posing like this. He was a Jewish photographer, but long story short, a lot of people, even though they are not people of color, they focused on that subject matter in their artworks, and really that's what we're promoting. So you don't have to be one race or another for us to purchase it. It just has to kind of fit our theme. Yeah, thank you. Excellent.
My question right here is about how many pieces, since you started collecting, how many pieces do you think you've actually touched and worked with?
Oh, wow. Well, the first time we collected, we had maybe 6, 7 pieces. And then out of duress, we had to sell everything to provide for the family. And then I got work and started buying again. We may have had another 12, 15 pieces. Lost my job, had to sell all of them the second time. It hurt the second time. The third time, we started sharing it publicly, and since then, we've been able to keep it and attract it. Right now, we have over 50 pieces. I think overall, we may have had maybe close to 80 in totality. I wish I had some of the pieces we sold earlier. Didn't know what we were doing. We were just, had to keep food on the table, and so, yeah, we wish we still had them. Excellent.
If I were to see a piece of black art in the community, what would I look for to see if it's an original? What type of clue that it isn't a fake, that it's something that I would like to purchase if it wasn't in a gallery? If it was in a black home, and say that the people would sell it to me.
A lot of times, we look at, the signature, if there's a piece, to say 1 out of 100 or whatever, you'll see the editions, how many prints they made. If you happen to know an artist, it came from that person's hand. Provenance that's at its highest is when you know the person that created it. But oftentimes tell people, and I don't know if I'm answering it correctly, you have some people who know the art world much better than I. I just tell them, buy what you like, whether it has a financial component or not. If you like it, great, but if you want to buy it for investment, then, I follow some of those auctions at galleries around the country, and those are the artists we began to focus on. When I first learned about the collection, I was exposed to the Mount Warsh collection by Mary Ann Mott. She was my boss at the time. And so I just honed in on the artists that she collected. And once I understood the financial aspect, those are typically the artists that we fell in love with. Yeah.
We got Jacob's got a question and sent to you.
Okay. Hey, Jacob.
Do you have a permanent location that you display the art, or do you mostly just tour? And if not, do you plan on eventually building one if you build the collection big enough?
Oh, wow. I mean, it would be awesome to have a building, but, you know, that costs rent, power, electricity, and until I get my own family's house paid off, you know, we just kind of collect it, and our goal is to have it in temporary exhibits. It would be great to have something throughout the year, you know, going from different places, but no, we don't have any permanent home other than ours, you know.
So you as a pastor, as a black man purchasing art, you know, being an art buyer, do you
Yes.
have any words of encouragement to give a young black artist?
Yeah, my word is follow your heart, follow your passion. You know, I left corporate America because, you know, nothing brought me greater joy than preaching and sharing the gospel and loving on people and helping people. And so I just wanted to devote my life to doing it. But at the same time, and following this great passion, call, and responsibility, I'm like, you know, I'm obligated to care for my wife and 2 children. And, you know, I'm just grateful that, you know, the Lord created an opportunity where we didn't realize the wealth potential within it. I don't know if you ever heard the story about the man who prayed and he was in poverty. He had a bunch of land, but he was broke. And after he died, they had his funeral. When they began to bury him, they realized that when they dropped him in the ground, it came spewing with oil. And so he was wealthy the whole time. And so my message to you is I think you have great wealth to be able to create it. And it's just a matter of time before people know who you are and what you're doing.
Any other questions?
I have one.
Okay.
Just curiosity question. So, what percentage, or well, what makes you decide which ones to, for like a better way of saying it, move and which ones to keep? So, do you look at, you know, is there things that, like when you make art, you fall in love with specific pieces and it's really hard to sell those? Is it sort of like that?
Yeah, well, you know, for us, again, our long-term goal is to be out of debt. And so sometimes I'll see a piece, and if somebody's going to give it away at a low value, and I know it's worth a lot more, you know, I'll just buy it and throw it in a corner. You know, we'll purchase it if we can afford it, knowing that there will be a day when we can sell it for profit. Typically, you know, we try to make at least double-digit returns. But, you know, sometimes as fast as you sell it, you know, you can't turn around and flip it the next day. So we may have to hold it for a little period of time. You know, again, if you got a lot of bills breathing down your neck, you know, I'll sell it all tomorrow if I had the right buyer. My goal is to pay off our house, and then we can, you know, I know how to rebuild. Dave Ramsey is a wonderful person, and before he ever became a millionaire, you know, he lost it. He lost it all, and now he's wealthier after that experience. Well, you know, we had to sell on few occasions, and we're just grateful that we're able to still add to it right now. You know, but some we buy, we want to have as part of a permanent collection, like the Tanner piece. I'll never sell that one again. We'll never sell it, hopefully. And now we're just trying to add to it as we can afford it. But sometimes we'll buy something just to get the money from it, as well as building the collection. So kind of multi-purposes. Thank you for your attentiveness. And yeah, I don't know if there are any other questions.
Anybody else?
Well, thank you very much. On behalf of all of us in the art and design department here at Mott, we want to thank you for sharing your collection, sharing your time today. Davida, thank you for keeping him on track and making sure that he's doing it. But yeah, thank you. If you are interested, if you have not had a chance to see the exhibition, the gallery is currently open down in the BADC, room 128, sorry. So you're welcome to go back down the hill. There's some stairs. If you're parked over in this area, you go back down. Anthony and Davida are going to be stopping back down there, so you might get a chance to ask a few more questions. And if you don't have a chance to see the exhibit today, it will be up until October 10th. So thank you very much for coming today and joining us for this talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.